things. And thank you all for joining us. Again, my name's Dylan Penner. I'm helping out with Seniors for Climate on a few things. Him, based in Ottawa on unceded Algonquin territory. And just wanted to start off by noting it's essential that we go above and beyond words of acknowledgement and familiarize ourselves with the Indigenous territories and nations and struggles where we live, because Indigenous sovereignty and land back is a climate solution. It is climate action, and Indigenous resistance over the last 10 years has stopped or delayed emissions equivalent to about a quarter of total emissions in Canada and the US, which is roughly the equivalent of 400 new coal-fired power plants, or roughly 345 million new cars. So one of the most powerful things we can do for climate action and climate justice is align our organizing, the work that we're doing in our communities from coast to coast to coast, in solidarity with Indigenous land defenders and water protectors. And with that, just a few housekeeping things for folks just joining us. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're joining us from. And in terms of the format for this workshop, we're going to be going over the basics of lobbying, as well as some tips on how to secure meetings with elected officials and how to make the most of those meetings. And we'll present a little bit on that, and there will be ample opportunity for questions and discussion after that. So just wanted to note of, we've all been feeling the impacts of the climate crisis for years, and it's been getting worse, and with fires and intense storms that many of us have been experiencing. For me, living in Ottawa, we've been inundated by floods and extreme weather and wildfire smoke, as many of you have. And just wanted to share a personal story. In 2019, there was historic spring flooding here, and that very nearly cut off the road to the water treatment plant that was used to deliver the chemicals needed for the facility, which at the time endangered 90% of the city's water supply. And this is just one example, of course, of a multitude of the ways the climate crisis is affecting us all. And it's clear that we need to change course, but the federal government is backtracking on climate emissions targets and doubling down on more pipelines. And that's why we're here today, to build and apply the people power necessary to ensure that the federal government takes climate action, the action that's necessary to address the crisis. And so tonight we're going to go over what's involved in setting up and planning for a meeting with a member of parliament. And I'm glad to be joined by Louise and Raleigh from Seniors for Climate, who will share some of their experiences about what's worked well in their experiencing in lobbying elected officials. And so we just wanted to start off with sharing a bit of a presentation on a new toolkit we're going to be sharing with you this evening, to give you some of the highlights, and we'll share with you the link for the toolkit so you can have that and use that in your communities with your local teams in doing this work. So we'll start, if we can start the slideshow. We'll go through the highlights of it. So just to start off, if we could go to slide 2, in case it's a question for anyone why we might engage in lobbying. There are a few reasons for that. It's a really effective way of engaging politicians between elections, and can be an important part of community-based political work, including getting more people in your communities involved. And it's a valuable form of advocacy. It also can leverage more movement power, building relationships, using that experience as an organizing tool, and can really activate and engage more activists to get involved in the work that you and your local teams and local groups are doing, and your voice matters. You likely know more than the politician you're meeting with does about the issue, and you're bringing forward your own valuable experience, which is really hard to argue with. And we can go to the next slide around what to ask for and how do we frame that, and how do we ensure something comes of the meeting, that we're not just meeting for the sake of meeting. And so really getting clear about specifically what you're asking for is essential, and making sure it's something achievable, asking for an action related to your issue that's so reasonable that they can't say no. So looking at while there are the bigger picture goals of Seniors for Climate and of the movement at large, and those are important to raise, it's also important to have modest, bite-sized things to ask for, like what can you do as my MP to raise this issue at your next caucus meeting, or if they're really keen, and maybe you've met with them a few times, can you introduce a private members bill, or the something that's very concrete, that you can get a yes to, that they have a bit of a responsibility to follow up with you about. And that's really essential. And for the next one, I'll pass it over to Louise to talk about.
All right, we're already here. Um, so I wanted to kind of just share my personal perspective on lobbying advocacy after having basically been focused on this issue and playing this game, if you want to call it that, for a very long time. And I've learned a few lessons along the way. The first one is that elected people are human, and we actually need to engage with them as humans. They actually do respond better to relationship building, positive engagement than they do fear. I remember when I first went to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the chair of our environment committee told me, and she was the mayor of Delta, had been the mayor for a very long time. And she said I was the first environmentalist that she had ever met that didn't yell at her. Think about that for a minute, right? That perception of us is that we only come to yell at them. Unfortunately, yelling at somebody doesn't actually, like we can think about it with our kids, doesn't really help us get through. And so we wanted to kind of just share some points here, and we could spend, I hope, a lot of time tonight talking about your own experiences with this issue. So the research before you go to the meeting, this one is so important. I can't overemphasize it. I have been to way too many meetings where people came in to talk to somebody, or lobby me as an example, and didn't have a clue. What the issues were that I was having to deal with, or that this MP or this MLA were having to deal with, didn't read up on their bio, didn't have any understanding of who they were in terms of their background, their passions, didn't understand what the platform that they were elected on, or if they're a parliamentary secretary or a minister, what their mandate letter said. And of course, they're working. Their job is to advance the agenda of the government, and our job is to actually engage in perspective taking. Not so much I'm going in to tell you only about me, but you're trying to understand what's their perspective, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And so you really do want to take some time before you do a lobbying meeting to both understand the person. So what's their bio? What made them run? What are they interested in? What have they said? Can you find any speeches? Can you find anything that they've said publicly in terms of their newsletters, or in the House of Commons, or in the legislatures? You want to know if they've been assigned any particular roles. To the degree that you can identify a solution to what we care about, which is climate change, that also advances their agenda, we are way further ahead and more likely to achieve some success. And so you do want to prepare. You really want to know. And one of the key elements that you often see is that we lobby on an issue that isn't even in the jurisdiction of the person we're talking to. So you want to know that what you're asking for falls within the jurisdiction of the member of parliament, or if it's provincial or if it's municipal, that you're targeting your ask. And of course, what's, in terms of the researching the party, what's in the platform or the legislative agenda. And if you've been involved in lobbying before, there's kind of a few important pieces, right? There's the platform that they ran on. Then there's the speech from the throne. So you essentially get from the platform the speech from the throne, which is always by design. It's not a fault. It's by design to be general. The specifics come in the budget. And so when you're doing the research, you really want to know, what did they say in the platform? What did they say in the speech from the throne? Because the speech from the throne tells you what the priority is for that session. And so you want to know what it is that they also have committed to advancing in this particular, say, year ahead. And then you want to know what they actually committed to within the budget. And to the degree that, because that's where the real details are. And to the degree that you're identifying issues that need an answer to, say, a question. Let's take climate change right now. One of the hottest topics is, are we going to regulate the big polluters with a strengthened industrial carbon price? Um, right now, it turns out the Prime Minister is giving a major speech tonight about the budget, and it looks like the carbon competitiveness strategy is likely to be embedded in the budget. What does that mean? That's huge. I would really say to you tonight, if you're thinking of lobbying the feds, you want to listen to that speech. You want to know what's coming up in that November 4th budget. Um, and then you want to have a bit of a primer, so that if you're not going alone, if you're working within your own network and your own communities, this would fit whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal. You want to have your research, prepare a one-pager, make sure everybody understands, have a little briefing binder, if you will. The other thing I suggest is, these political folks not only have to deliver on their agenda, the government's agenda identified in the platform, speech from the throne, and the budget, the three key documents, but they also have to get reelected. It's really smart. You may be lobbying within the constituency office, or you may be at the legislature or at parliament. But it's important to know what the current issues are. It may be your issue that's been, in the news, hot topic, but also it would be important to know what it is that the MP or MLA or municipal politician has been doing within their own riding, and what's important to them. Check out their newsletter. Make sure you've got a sense of those issues. And then use all of that to find something that you can share, that connect that on at a values level, or something you can say, congratulate them on something. Try to find a way to start the conversation where you open the door to a positive engagement, some trust building, some relationship building, because the more you like each other, not that you agree, but the more there's some trust, some level of connection, the more likely they are to carry the message and maybe do something for you, as Dylan has said, to follow up and get back to you and help you advance the issues that we're trying to engage on. So let me maybe stop there. We can share a lot of personal stories after. I've got so many to tell you that I'm just going to stop, because we could talk all night about how we've experienced different things. The one mistake I've made, and again, just encourage you as I hand it back over to Rolly, is to try not to make it personal. I'll tell you a time I was at a press conference and I was really hopping mad. I was hopping mad. I was hopping mad at Ralph Goodell. He was the natural resources minister at the time, and as usual, they weren't doing what we wanted them to do. They weren't advancing the climate agenda quickly, and I attacked him personally. I also made a mistake once with Paul Martin, where I really went after him hard. And those two experiences that I was basically banned from meeting with them for a while. You don't have to make it personal. You don't have to attack people in terms of their own personal integrity. Stick to the issues, stick to the thing that you're after, stick to the concerns and their obligations, their commitments, the things they've promised to do, but try not to make it personal. And that takes real discipline. And I can share from the wounds I have that I've learned a few lessons about not doing that. All right, I'll hand it over to the next slide for Rolly.
Thank you, Louise. That's a lot of homework that you have to do, and you haven't even scheduled your meeting yet. So yeah, I'll be dealing with slide number 5, which is scheduling your meeting and preparing for it. There might be a little bit of overlap, but first of all, you have to get a meeting. And what we recommend is that first of all, you first do a phone call. Phone first, identify yourself as a constituent, and then you want to follow that up with an email, and you'll tell whoever answers that you will follow it up with an email, and you do that. Unfortunately, you very seldom get a hit the first time you do this. Once you've sent your email, you might want to say in that email that you'll call. If you haven't heard back, you'll call to follow up on your email, and you do that, and you keep calling and resending your email with reference that following up on the email from the previous week, for example, and eventually either they'll get tired of you or they'll say this person is quite serious and wants to meet with our MP. And so and you should be tracking this as you're going along. There's a template in the toolkit where you can do that. In other words, on which day did you call, did you phone, who did you talk to, and what was the response? And basically, you want to keep notes on this. And there's a template that you can use in the toolkit for that. So that's basically the phone and the email follow-up. We also have in the toolkit a phone script that you might want to look at before your call, but I mean, it's a phone call. Again, you identify yourself. You might want to, indicate to whoever answers, it will not be the MP, but his assistant or her assistant, that, what Climate for Seniors is, what we do, what we're about, and that you really do want to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. And that's the way you keep at it. The next step, of course, again, before you meet, you have to build your team. And there's also an email script, by the way, in the toolkit. So phone script and email script that you can adapt to your own writing. And then you want to build your team. So how big should your team be? I think it should be at least 3. 5 is a good number. You don't want 10 people. That would be too big. Some of the backbenchers and the MPs have a very small office, so 10 people might be a big crowd. But you see what it's like for your writing. You want to confirm the roles. Who's going to be the lead? Who's going to be the timekeeper? Because you're only going to have 30 minutes, and somebody has to say, we've got 5 minutes. Keeping notes is very important. You might want a couple of people to keep notes. Also, who will follow up after? Usually that might be the lead. And of course, there's the taking a photograph at the end and ask permission to use it on social media. And basically that's how you get ready. And again, there's a template in the toolkit that you can use to track who your team is and what you're going to talk about. Now, Louise covered a lot of the pre-meeting, research that you have to do. And that's, yes, very, very important. I totally agree with that. What you want to bring in for content or for the meeting is that you don't want to go in there with, several reports and, 2 inches worth of paper. You do not want to do that. You might want to bring 2 or 3 pages for the actual meeting itself. You can send additional materials after the meeting if you happen to discuss a topic that the MP is interested in. You can offer to send a link or to send an article. And I remember having done that several times. as Louise mentioned, you want to bring what the information you're going to leave. We're going to work on we being central organizers, we're going to prepare what we call a leave behind. It'll be basically what it is a one-page document, English on one side, French on the other side. And again, it provides a little bit of context, some information about Seniors for Climate, and also maybe 3 or 4 asks, specific ask that, again, as Louise pointed out, an MP can identify with or can, and of course, there should be climate-related asks, obviously. And what we've done sometimes is gone, when in doing the research, found some issues that the MP is interested in or follows closely, and then try to shape or to craft our comments to follow up on those issues. For example, if the high cost of living is an issue for that particular MP, one might want to show how, acting on climate and transitioning to clean energy is actually a saving and good for the economy. And so that's how you can sort of build on what their issues are and what our issues are, how we can relate those. Let's see. And I think I made a note here that when you present a document or information for the MP, you want to make sure it's in a folder, not just loose paper. We all know what happens to loose pieces of paper. However, it's harder for someone to misplace or to drop a folder in the garbage bin, and I think it's also a way of presenting the information in a professional way. And basically, that's how you would want to craft your message. You'll only have probably 30 minutes. And what I have done before is if there are 4 asks, you will want to say at some point that you want to focus on maybe the number 1 out of the 4. You always put the priority as number 1. And then the other 3 are part of the leave behind that you ask the member of parliament to read and get back to you if there's a need for more information. And I think I've covered the 5 boxes: the phone the MP, email the MP, and craft your message carefully. And if you do that and prepare the way Louise outlined in slide 4, you'll be off and running. Back to you, Dylan.
Thanks so much. And so now you've got your meeting. And so for the meeting itself, as Rolly mentioned, and we can get into a little more detail in the next slide. Once you've built your team, it's really important to identify a few different roles that people can take, and really it often breaks down to who's going to speak about what, who's going to follow up, and who's going to document things. So in terms of speaking, that involves introducing you and your local group and Seniors for Climate, and it involves asking what the MP knows or thinks about climate action and where they're at on that, explaining what Seniors for Climate is demanding, and thanking the staff at the end of the meeting. And in terms of follow-up, that can involve some questions in terms of what specifically the MP will do, asking if they have any questions, and also confirming the MP's next steps. So it gets back to that follow-up that we were talking about. And in terms of documenting, making sure someone on your team is taking notes, if you want, and everyone's comfortable with it, taking a picture of the group with the MP and posting on social media, and going from there. And a few tips on the next slide. It's really important to stick to the agenda, to stick to your plan for the meeting, because you'll likely only have 30 minutes for the meeting. That means you'll have 5 or 10 minutes for the presentation, and a little bit of time for discussion and getting into next steps. And so if you and MPs can ramble on for a long time, sometimes intentionally, to run out the clock before getting into concrete steps. So sticking to the agenda is really important if you want to actually make sure there are concrete things that you're asking the MP to do, and concrete things that they're going to follow up on. Important to not assume the MP knows the issue. They may, depending on the MP, but they may not. So it's really important to really not to get too jargony, not speak in acronyms, to make sure you don't lose them. It's really valuable to anticipate questions, and this connects back to the research, and that relates to the where they are as a person, where their party is. You can start to see, well, how are we going to pay for this, or how does that align with this, if this is the priority our government's had stated in the throne speech. You can sort of see what kinds of questions are likely to come up, and some of them may be challenging questions, and so thinking of them ahead of time rather than trying to come up with an answer on the spot will serve you well. As Louise was saying, don't come in angry, be as pleasant as you can, because you're really trying to get them on your side. And that's not to say that you're automatically going to agree with them. Depending on the MP, you may disagree quite a lot, but you can disagree respectfully, and also leaving time for a response. And this gets back to not just having a meeting for the sake of a meeting where you say thank you and best of luck with all the things, but leaving time so that they can answer you, and you have time in the meeting for really ensuring that there's going to be some kind of follow-up, that there is something that the MP is going to do and follow up with you about. And ultimately your overall goal is to create a relationship, and look at this as not just setting up one meeting, but setting up nurturing a relationship, so that you can find your champions in Parliament, MPs who are going to raise your issues on a consistent basis, and also for them to know who in their community they can go to for information, for strategizing, for all kinds of things, so that it's not just necessarily, if it's a relationship that you've cultivated effectively, it's not always going to be you going to them. They may come to you sometimes with questions or ideas, or information of, hey, we just heard through the grapevine there's this new legislation coming, and so creating those kinds of relationships can help our movement as a whole get a heads up on things that are coming down the pipe that we might not have heard otherwise. And don't assume that they are going to oppose you based on their political affiliation. There are, even within each political party, there is a political spectrum, and you may have allies, or at least not full-on enemies, where you think they're going to be. So we can go on to the next slide, but that's an important one to keep in mind. And yeah, that just sort of also highlights the importance of, like, thinking through where they're coming from, not just going in with the mindset of how do we win on our issues, but think of things from the MP's perspective, and what they want, and that's to be well informed, to be presented with achievable solutions, to have reliable contacts who can share information and help with problem solving, and that can include in terms of, like, the high level federal legislative scene, but also climate related things in the riding, you'll have hopefully demonstrated you're well placed to help with. And what they don't want, again, to Louise's points, they don't want to be talked down to or insulted. They are very busy and don't want to have their time wasted. They don't want to hear the same argument over and over again. So this gets back to the preparation, and of course, not going in angry, essentially, and lastly, after the meeting is just as important as well. With the next slide, it's really worthwhile to do a debrief, checking in with your team about how things went, what went well, what you could do better next time. Congratulating each other and on things like key interventions, and sharing a meeting report with National Seniors for Climate, so that we can get a bit of a paint a bit of a picture of how things are going, in terms of everyone who's connecting with their members of parliament, and that's probably a good place to stop the slideshow. And again, this is just an overview of the toolkit, which I'll share in the chat here, which you can take a look at after the meeting, that gets into much more depth on what we've shared so far, and has some worksheets so that you can have a place to just track your team building, and how the meeting scheduling is going, and contact info for staff at MP's offices, and those various kinds of things. So thanks, Louise and Raleigh, for that, and we'll go back to Raleigh for a moment to just share a little bit on some personal experiences with lobbying, and then we're going to have some time for questions and reflections and discussion about what we've shared about lobbying in general. So we can all get into it. So over to you, Raleigh.
Thanks, Dylan. So a lot of information in that slideshow, and of course, all the details in the lobbying kit, which is quite comprehensive. I just wanted to spend a few minutes to share some maybe lessons learned, or things that I've learned from lobbying. I've been lobbying primarily with Citizens Climate Lobby for about, I want to say they've been around, CCL has been around for 15 years. I think I've been there since the beginning. So I've been doing this for quite a while. I'm sure I've had 20, 25 meetings over the years with MPs, MPPs, a few municipal politicians, a few senators. And so I've come up with some lessons, like I said, observations, I guess. At first, lobbying can seem overwhelming, but that's very short-lived, because as soon as you get into it, you'll realize that really, as Louise was mentioning, politicians are just normal people, very human like you and I. They have their good days and bad days, and strengths and weaknesses. And if you meet the same politician several times and establish a relationship, you get to share about some of these personal items. I've found that keeping the meeting very informal, casual, as simple as possible, and try not to take on too much, share the workload or the talking points with members of your team. And remember that you probably know more about the climate crisis than they do. We are the experts because we are Seniors for Climate, so we are associated with the issues a lot more than some of them are, unless they're, of course, in that particular ministry. If you were meeting with Catherine McKenna back in the day, well, she would have known a lot about climate change and the climate crisis. And I always remember and tell myself that lobbying can be fun. Getting to know some new team members, meeting for coffee, or even something stronger, maybe before, not something stronger, not before, but maybe after your meeting. you build that. There's that also that adrenaline, that feeling of anticipation and excitement. It builds your confidence, and you'll want to do this again, I'm sure. I've met both on Parliament Hill, and I live in Ottawa, so it's a lot easier for someone who lives in Ottawa to meet on the Hill. I find that a little bit more challenging, but also more, I don't know, more, how can I put it? Maybe more, it's got a bit of a serious element to it because you're on the Hill. That's the seat of government in Canada, and that says something. But one thing I do know is that you always want to expect the unexpected. And one time, just a couple of experiences that I find so funny today. We were meeting this male MP, and he was late coming into our meeting, and so he came in his jogging suit, and uh, and he apologized for that. He said he'd just been jogging around the hill, around Parliament buildings, and so we had the meeting with him in his jogging suit. At the end of the meeting, when we asked to do a photo, he says, "Well, I can't take a photo in my jogging suit. Just wait a couple of minutes." And he went back somewhere and put a shirt and a tie on, and we took a photo. So that that was kind of an odd meeting. And that same gentleman, when we met with him in his own constituency one time, one of our team members said after the meeting, "Well, I'm going home now to do some pickling." And he and that lady and the MP got into a long conversation about pickling and what's the best to do and how to do it. So apparently he was very involved in that as well. So it just goes to show you the personalities come out, the human elements come out. I remember going into Karen McCrimmon's office, and she said, "I've got this covered, folks," because she had James Hanson's book, "Storms of My Grandchildren," I think it was, and she had pages marked and all these stickies all over. So I guess that was their way of convincing us that she was definitely a climate progressive as well. So all kinds of things like this do happen, and as I said, I just roll with it, get going, and have fun. And I'm going to stop here for as far as my and answer questions later on when we move to that part of the agenda. Back to you, I guess, Dylan.
Thanks so much for that. And yeah, I see there's a question in the chat I'll get to in a moment, and just wanted to share as well. And the toolkit touches on it a little bit, the value of doing things other than lobbying in terms of your work in your community in ways that can get the attention of or build the relationship with the MP, and that can be things like op-eds in the local paper or showing up at local events where you know the MP is going to be, so you're having opportunities to chat outside the formal meeting space. But I was involved in a speaking tour a number of years back, and we had arranged some meetings with MPs, and the person was from out of the country, and it turned out she had forgotten her ID to get into the Confederation building in Ottawa, which is where a lot of MPs have their office. But because we'd done really effective media relations work, she'd been on a lot of interviews and stuff. We got to the security desk, and it was at that point where we had a meeting with I think it was a cabinet minister at the time, actually, and we realized she'd forgot her passport, and the meeting was just a few minutes away. But the TV that was in the lobby was playing an interview with her, and so there's a role for media relations and community engagement, and because like in that situation, we said, "Oh, forgot the idea, but look at the TV, that's her." You can verify there, and they ended up letting us in. And so like there's value to a whole lot of the other work that we can do, and that you are doing in your communities, that can have unseen benefits for problem solving in other ways. To just want to answer the one question that was in the chat, and then I'll go to Louise and Raleigh, I would suggest like meeting with your own MP, regardless of what party they're in, is valuable. There are particularities to being a constituent that, regardless of their party, does make them more likely to meet with you. That said, you can meet with other MPs as well, and there is a strategic value, especially with the formation of the Liberals Environmental Caucus, to meeting with Liberal MPs as well, even if none of them are your MP. So there is a value to both. Really, I'll go to Louise, and then we'll get to some of the other questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I put a couple of things in the chat. One is um, uh, what I thought was a pretty good example today of some lobbying activity on the Hill today that started with a press conference. You won't necessarily, do that if you're having a constituency meeting, but in this case, that was an organized event by My Climate Plan, and I thought it was a fantastic example of how you do it. The people who were part of the press conference told personal stories about wildfires. They had three actionable, relevant asks that were critically, like really well laid out. My only concern about it, just in terms of thinking about timing, some of the asks that they had related to the upcoming federal budget. Well, the federal budget's written. Like, if you want to influence the federal budget, you really need to be in the game in summer, late summer, certainly September. Once you get into October, November, obviously the thing is written. So think about timing when you are engaging, but the press conference and the way they framed up the asks and the stories they were telling, I think is a fantastic example. I also included a link to the lobby registry. And the reason is that it turns out that if you're a volunteer, you don't have to register with the lobby registry. But if you were a paid person, if you worked for an environmental group as an employee, you do have to register with the lobby registry. And I'm just thinking, Rolly and Dylan, we should probably have a section on that in our toolkit. And then finally, just my own little quick answer to some of the things. I live in a riding that is super conservative, like really, like they would vote conservative if you were a tree stump, like just as the way it is. Very conservative place. And it is hard for me to think about meeting with them because it does feel like a bit of a waste of time. But I actually think it's important to do. It will not necessarily be a meeting that leads to the outcomes you're looking for, but it's important because it's important they know that you live in their riding. Right? That there's something more than just their own friends in that writing. And so be better than me. Do it. Go do it. I would suggest that you do. And then around the questions of Parliament, it's a minority government. And so you want to think about that. Minority government is very different. If it was a majority government, I actually would spend way more time with the government, whatever party that was. But in a minority situation, they need the other parties in order to get their budget passed, to get their other key pieces of legislation. You may need all parties or a party to support the government in order to get something through that you want. So that means, in this case, I'd be meeting with the NDP, right? I'd be meeting with the Bloc in particular to make sure that they are on top of the issues that you are interested in. So that's important to think about. What kind of government situation am I dealing with? And a minority government's a different ballgame than a majority for sure.
Thanks for that. And there's a question from Melissa asking about whether it would be more effective to lobby as quote unquote concerned citizens or as seniors for climate. And really, you spoke to that a little bit in the chat, but I'm wondering if you could just speak to that here and expand on it if you want.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, in your writing, you are a concerned constituent, and you happen to be a member of Seniors for Climate, which is as I've laid out in my answer to Melissa's question, who happens to be part of a large movement, a growing movement of seniors who want their government to act on climate. I think you do both. But first and foremost, you're a constituent of that writing, and you may have voted for that member of parliament, but he or she represents you, and you're there to speak with that person about your concerns. I think you can do both.
Thanks for that. And there's a question from Patricia about how there's a feeling amongst progressives in the riding that no matter what people say to their conservative MP, he'll just do what Pierre Poilievre says. And Patricia's asking how to address this. I'll just briefly add that I was involved in an organizing effort a couple years ago where we were trying to get as many members of parliament to table a petition on just transition and climate justice as possible, and we managed to get MPs across party lines to do that, including 5 conservative MPs, and the way that folks were able to get conservative MPs to table something that spoke to a range of things that our movement's been calling for, that the Conservative Party has definitely not been calling for, was being very clear in their meetings with those MPs that you may not agree with what we're calling for, but you have a responsibility to represent your constituents. And while that didn't work with every Conservative MP, it did work with some. And so taking it from the sort of democratic principles perspective can open the door a little bit further in that context. Again, within every party there is a political spectrum, so it may depend on the conservative MP. I don't know which one is your MP, but with some it can help to take that approach. I don't know if Louise or Raleigh have something to add on that
Dylan,
front.
I can add that I remember a meeting with Lisa Raitt, who was a minister in the Harper government, and we were there. I was there with Kathy Orlando and other members, CCLers, and we wanted to specifically talk about carbon pricing, obviously. And in our conversation, it came out that she herself believed that her government would have to, at some point, uh, tackle the issue of pricing pollution. Yeah, that was pretty cool for her, for that to come from someone at that level within the Harper government. Of course, they lost the election and we got carbon pricing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if our meeting had anything to do with future government conservative party policy. But anyways, so yeah, you should meet all parties, and regardless of maybe lower expectations with some, but it doesn't matter. I think it's all part of the democratic process, as you laid out so well, Dylan.
Thanks for that. And Arij, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a reader for Kids Canada. I joined a little bit late to the workshop, so I'm not sure if you've already covered it in your presentation, but with the toolkit, because the kind of lobbying our grassroots network does can range with federal MPs, with provincial MPs, with municipality, city councilors, and also school trustees. So just kind of wondering, does it cover kind of diverse intervention approaches that we should look at based on the type of lobbying that needs to be done and the type of decision maker that we're trying to contact for a particular liver? And then I'm also wondering what is your suggestion in terms of for parent organizers that want to engage with their local MP? Um, should their concerns or asks be very specific on a specific topic, or can they take a range of topics that concern them and include that as kind of like a bigger ask?
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for that. Just quickly on the first point, while the toolkit does focus on federally on members of parliament, the general recommendations in there in terms of like how do you get a meeting, how do you build your team, how do you run an effective meeting, how do you follow up, those I think are generally applicable regardless of what level of government you're talking about. And part of the reason we put this together is that often it feels like the federal government is kind of the most inaccessible, and in some ways, like if you're talking about municipalities or school boards, connecting with folks, elected folks there, it can feel a lot more a lot less remote and more accessible since there's sort of more of a closeness to the community. But that said, the idea is it's the general principles are sort of applicable at any level, with the caveat that, and Louise spoke to this earlier, there are jurisdictional differences in terms of what level of government you're talking about, and what role they have in various policies. That said, there are many climate adjacent or issues that intersect with climate policies, or that are climate policies, where municipal, federal, and provincial governments have shared responsibility or have their own responsibilities for that. And there may be particularities for like what that responsibility is at a given level of government, and would encourage folks to read up on that. But that's yeah, it's generally the general sort of approach to how to lobby is sort of broadly applicable. And the second point was around if I caught it correctly, was do you bring in just one issue, or sort of a range of issues? Louise or Raleigh, do you want to speak to that in terms of like the what's a helpful way to focus, because there can be, there are a lot of things we want in terms of climate policies as a movement, but how do we balance that with being focused, as well as recognizing that if we want the elected official to do something, how do we help them focus on a task, a sort of task-oriented way, and not overwhelm them with a sort of long laundry list of things. Louise or Rolly, do you have any thoughts on that aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, be specific and be focused. Um, uh, to go in and just have a general high level conversation at a level of principles, it's an interesting conversation. You maybe do that at the farmer's market or something. But if you're in their office and you're actually lobbying, then you have to be lobbying on something specific, something that's actionable, and something that's actually on their plate and part of the conversation they're already having, whether that's within caucus, if it's a cabinet minister within cabinet, that reflects the mandate that they have. Like you have to be super specific because they are actually very busy. And so, I can, my biggest advice to people who want to lobby or advocate is to remember it's not about you as much as you think it is, right? It's about perspective taking, having a sense of what's on their plate right now and how does my issue fit into that. And so that does mean you have to be focused and specific. And so, because partly you don't want to let them off the hook. It's very easy for them to say, yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Climate change sucks, So what? Right? What did I get out of that? I got nothing out of that. What I want from you is to commit to the fact that you're going to strengthen industrial carbon pricing and you're going to do it in the next 6 weeks or whatever it's going to be, or it's going to be in the budget. You're going to make whatever the thing is that you need, you're going to approve in a national project, a national grid that it is clean and builds for whatever it is, something very, very specific, is my strongest advice, to folks.
Thanks for
And of
that.
course, in the context of Seniors for Climate, our goal is to be guiding you toward that, right? The idea here is that over time, we're building a team here that is capable of advocacy, on call, if you will, with our guidance, our materials. Here we go, right? Just like Citizens Climate Lobby does, but from a Seniors for Climate perspective. There was a question here about, do we do this on our own as individuals or as Seniors for Climate? Well, that's up to you to decide. Obviously, we're thinking about it from a Seniors for Climate perspective because we actually think seniors are all powerful. We vote, and we need to remind them of that. We vote, right? We are the ones that shifted to probably put you in power. And so, working collectively gives us more heft, right? More influence, more effect. And I think for me personally, I think we really underestimate the power of seniors to influence outcomes, and that collectively we can really make some things happen if we can work collectively. And so, meeting individually as a constituent's great, but I think there's some power in working together.
Thanks, Louise. And Jerry, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to just get your take on. I was talking with a friend the other day who's involved with Scan Edmonton, and we were talking about well, various issues, mostly methane. And she said she's come to the conclusion that she thinks that without PR, like proportional representation, climate is not going to be, in the top like three things issues anymore I mean I just want to get your take on it because I'm a big proponent of PR, but I know that the people have been advocating for it have been advocating it for like 30, these are the people that are alive probably. But anyway, they've been advocating it for a very long time, and I'm not sure we're getting anywhere. So, do you think that it would be worthwhile if you went and talked to somebody if you did get into an MP? Mine's Carrie Diot, completely useless, conservative. I live in Alberta. But anyway, do you think that bringing up PR with these people when you're in the room is worthwhile?
And Louise and Raleigh, feel free to speak to this too. I will say, as someone who's in my career done a fair bit of campaigning and organizing nationally on democratic reform, uh, we have the institutions we have, and the climate crisis is urgent. And, yes, feel free to, raise that kind of thing if you want, but I don't think that we can wait for a perfect form of government or a better form of democratic governance than we have to push for what we need for in terms of climate policies. We need to we need to recognize we have what we have, as imperfect as it is, and do our best to build the people power needed under the current conditions to win what we need to win. But Louise and Raleigh, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well,
Well, I don't, oh, sorry, Rolly, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, we cannot afford to wait for PR.
I'm
Uh,
not suggesting that we wait.
no, I know that, but I'm just trying to make the point that,
Yeah.
and the other point is that it wasn't very long ago that the top priority was uh,
Yeah.
climate change. Now, it might not show up as the top priority on the list right now, but I mean, Louise certainly has data that shows that it's still it's still one of the top concerns of, but I don't know what the percentage is, about 3/4 of Canadians. And the reason it's not on the top, on the top priority for voters right now is because there are more pressing, apparently, day-to-day issues. And of course, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but it is still a very, very fundamental concern of most Canadians. And hopefully that will come back in the polling at some point in time. But in the meantime, we have to keep at it more than ever. So maybe Louise wants to enrich on
Yeah,
that.
I would add a few things. So yeah, don't get discouraged by top of mind concerns polling. It doesn't tell you anything other than, what are the material concerns on people's minds right now? It matters. They're all security related issues, and we know from a hierarchy of needs, you start pressing on security issues, you do distract people, right? And so, yes, security concerns, and so our solutions, to the degree they contribute to people feeling safer, more secure, is really smart comms. But the issues of worried about climate change, issues of climate anxiety, issues of concern about climate change remain very high in the polls. And we should never forget that that's a core values, but it tells you why personal stories are so important. Personal stories of exposure to extreme events, whether it be flooding, wildfire, whatever, heat waves, really, really, really do open the door to a conversation of shared values. On the question of proportional representation, we should be advocating for it, but not necessarily in the climate meeting. That's a separate campaign and worth work, to the degree we've all got volunteer space, worth joining that group to advocate and lobby for those things. Um, uh, and just to reassure you on the question of methane, I'm willing to put a bet of $100 on the table that we get the methane reg because it's so economical. It will be in the climate competitiveness strategy. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Everybody that I've talked to says it's there. That's the one thing we are going to get.
Good.
The rest of it is I'm not so sure. But and just as a tactic, by the way, sometimes there's value. And now this is just one of those things one can do, but sometimes there's value when you know something's going to go forward is to kind of demand it. Right now would be a pretty good time to start demanding, the implementation of the methane regulation, to claim credit that you actually got it later. To kind of, put some heft behind your advocacy. But yeah, I think methane will be the one thing we probably get. The rest of it is going to be harder to swallow, I think.
Thanks, Louise. And Jerry, go ahead.
No, I'm just I'll just take it down.
Okay.
I'm fine. Um, Thank you for that. I have been working with Claire Katz, and so I think yes, the methane thing, the regulations hopefully will go through. I just, and I don't know. I am involved with Fair Vote Canada, and one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that a lot of people, you can kind of refer to it now as PR rather than even proportional representation. So you have to keep at it. And I guess what I would do is if I did get in, to see Kerry Diot, I would talk to him about that anyway. I would bring it up. But anyway, so that's just my thoughts. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much. And yeah, just to pick up the thread on minority parliament as well. It can be helpful to if you haven't already with your local team, do a little mapping as well of the sort of the role of the different parties and the influence of industry and all of those kinds of things because that can inform what you might try and get out of the meeting. Whereas like with the Liberal Party, for example, since they are the governing party, there are certain things that you can ask for that are particular to that party in terms of government legislation and that kind of thing. For other parties, there are things you can ask for in terms of like if you hear that there's a bill or a motion coming related to what we're concerned about, can you keep us in the loop on that so we have a heads up in time so that we can do something or if it's a more intransigent MP, regardless of what party there is, then you might need to take a more assertive approach. And I know in some cases, like where MPs were refusing to meet for months and months, some people held an event out in front of their office to get their attention, and that led to a meeting. Whereas sometimes some MPs can be really keen and they'll welcome you with open arms on the first phone call. The staffer will hand the phone over to them. It really is a bit of a range and so it's valuable to sort of recognize that there can be different approaches you may need to take depending on the MP, depending on the riding, and some folks in the chat have spoken to this. And then there's the question of, like, regardless of what you do, if you have a really intransigent MP who's not going to meet and they're just way out there on, like, down the fake news rabbit holes, is it even worthwhile to meet with that MP? Maybe go to a neighboring riding and that kind of question. And that is a fair point. It's not to say that, like, you don't keep trying, but in terms of federal politics, you're not restricted from meeting with other MPs. You can, and there can be value to that. So it's not necessarily an either or thing. Even if you do get a meeting with your MP, it can still be worthwhile to meet with other MPs as well. And Arij has their hand up as well. So go ahead. Reej, I can't tell if you're talking, but if you are still on mute.
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering, there are a few MPs that usually do tend to work on topics that kind of revolve or like indirectly relate to climate action, like really working on extreme heat in schools or childcare settings or those kind of stuff, or electric school buses. Um, what From what I've heard, these private member bills don't normally get passed. But I'm wondering if you have any suggestions around, is it worthwhile still engaging in lobbying with that particular member on private member bills?
Yeah, Louise, you want to take that one?
Yeah, no, I do. Elizabeth May has had, I think, 3 of her private members' bills pass. It is worth doing because you can use it to start a conversation. Um, uh, so here's just an example. This is one that I think could be a very cool campaign for Seniors for Climate. We don't have consistent rules. In fact, most provinces have none for maximum indoor heat temperatures in buildings. We have the minimum warm temperatures for winter, but we don't have maximum temperatures for heat in buildings across Canada. That could be, and Canadian Environmental Law Association has a draft bill that you can actually use. And I think that's a really worthy campaign because a lot of seniors, particularly low-income seniors, are living in places that are poorly insulated and get very hot. May not have an ability to have air conditioning or afford the electricity for air conditioning or have a heat pump. It's a real opportunity to make something relevant to say a particular person who may not be all engaged around climate itself, but is open to being engaged around health effects. For example, it's a concrete thing, something people can do, something you could get behind. It's a real opportunity to find a sponsor to carry a piece of legislation forward. So that's just one idea of a possible way, but there's a lot you can do with a private member's bill, including, you know, taking a, I don't want to say this in a cynical way, but using it as an example of essentially getting MPs on the record or a party on the record for opposing it. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do with a private member's bill. I've seen, for example, on wildfires, there was a private member's bill for providing better benefits and protections to wildfire fighters. And the initial private member's bill was only for structural firefighters and not wildfire firefighters. And there was a campaign to get that included. And so, there are a huge amount of things we can do. I do think we underplay the power of the health angle on engaging people. We often will have, our ideas fixated on the emission side of it, the mitigation side of it. But listen, adaptation is really for many, many people, the way they enter into the climate conversation is through not just their personal experience, but things we're doing to build resiliency, safety, protection, all of that. Anyway, yeah, I think there's some value there.
Yeah, and just related to that, that also raises how having something that's focused but also broadly applicable and broadly experienced, like that, can be a really interesting door opener for building coalition, for building alliances in your communities as well. Just to take that example, the maximum heat in buildings efforts is also something increasingly the labor movement's taken up. And I know the Ontario Federation of Labor has been campaigning on that in terms of a maximum heat in workplaces, as has the Worker Solidarity Network in BC. It's something increasingly that public education advocates are taking up because of the impacts in schools, and so there are opportunities there for building alliances with parents and students and teachers as well. And this is just one example, but it's worthwhile to think through, like, as you build your local teams, in addition to folks who are just involved in Seniors for Climate or your local Seniors Climate group, connecting with other movements is a valuable way to build the kind of leverage we need to get our MPs to do the things that we're asking for as well. And that's just a good example of that. And Jenny in the chat is speaking to that as well, in terms of collaborating with other stakeholders in your community around this kind of work. So I think we're gonna move towards wrapping up for now, but just a reminder, we'll throw it back in the chat again, that you can download the toolkit and make use of that, and feel free to be in touch. There's lots of hopefully helpful information in there, as well as worksheets for tracking your work, and in terms of contact info with the MP's offices, and all your team building and all of that kind of thing, as well as keeping us posted on how your meetings go, so that we can have a big picture and share that big picture with how all of our collective efforts are going. And also, just on a related note, and firstly, just wanted to thank Louise and Raleigh for all the amazing experiences and insights that they've shared. Wanted to just share a digital action that we've had recently, that you may have seen and may have signed, calling on Prime Minister Carney and several cabinet ministers to take stronger climate action, and just sharing it in the chat in case you haven't seen that, that it's a digital action that you can share with your friends and on social media, and send a letter to the government yourself. And over 350 people have already done so already. So just wanted to share that, and again, thanks to Louise and Raleigh, and thanks to all of you for joining us, and for participating, and all the great questions, and for all the work, and the important work that you're doing in your communities to turn this ship that we're all on around. And feel free to be in touch with us if you have any other questions about what's in the toolkit. And I don't know if Louise or Raleigh have anything else before we wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to talk very, very briefly about uh, like our fall program. Just in passing, the reason we're focusing on lobbying right now is because in a survey that was done quite recently across Canada, 4,700 people or so were contacted. There were 560 completed the survey, and the one item, or the one question was, what do you think is the most important goal for Seniors for Climate? And the response that got the most attention and the highest ranking was applying pressure to politicians and other groups for bolder, faster climate action. So lobbying is an advocacy, of course, is exactly part of that, applying pressure to politicians. And of course, the e-blasts we're doing, and Dylan just referred to that. We'll probably be doing another workshop on lobbying maybe in November. And what is it again? The constituency week that is coming up. I think it's
Yeah, that's
Dylan?
right. I believe it's November 8th to 16th. So for folks who don't know, your MPs are going to be back in your ridings, in all of our ridings, in that time, and it does also overlap with the next UN Climate Summit. So there's some interesting opportunities there. And
So we're
yeah,
going to send out an email with the link to the video, the recording for this evening, also the chat, and we will also be providing a one pager, as I said, or a leave behind document, and give you a contact person, perhaps myself or others in our membership who have lobbied, so that we can provide support if you're doing your lobbying for the first time. If it's by Zoom or if you're doing it in person, if you need to talk to someone before you do it, I'll make myself available for that and try to find a few other people who have lobbied and would like to provide some support. So we'll be following up this workshop. And back to you to wrap it up, Dylan. I just didn't want to forget that.
yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that great update, and thanks again, everyone. And we look forward to connecting with you more about this, and we'll keep you posted on some next steps in the near future, and look forward to hearing how all your efforts go. So thanks again, and we'll wrap it up there.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.